The day Willie confessed to that poor girl, he locked me in the equipment room. I banged on the door, begging him to let me out. He stood there, one hand in his pocket, casually saying, "Olive, this is your punishment for slandering her, so just take it." After the 16th hour of being locked in, he finally let me out. At the door of the equipment room, he was holding the poor girl's hand, smiling lazily. "Remember to bring us breakfast tomorrow." But after that day, I quietly transferred schools and never appeared in front of him again. I heard that Willie had been searching for me everywhere. 3 years later, he was waiting for me downstairs by my dorm, gripping my shoulders, gritting his teeth. "Olive, is your heart made of flesh? How could you just abandon me like that?" The adult gift my dad gave me was a watch. A white strap, a silver dial. It wasn't very expensive, but it cost him half of his monthly salary. But suddenly, the watch was gone, and it turned up on Gloria's wrist. When I quietly asked her to return it, Gloria looked at me in disbelief. "What are you talking about? This is my watch, not yours." As I saw the classmates around us start to look, Gloria suddenly raised her voice, looking at me with righteous indignation. "I know you've always looked down on poor students like me. But how can you accuse me of stealing just because you lost something?" Once she said that, the classmates, who had no idea what was going on, immediately started whispering. "Why does she look down on poor students? Her mom is just a waitress, right?" Others said, "But Gloria's watch really does look like the one Olive was wearing the other day. Gloria's on government assistance, how could she afford a watch?" My watch had a scratch on the dial, which happened when I was cutting vegetables for my mom. And at that moment, the watch on Gloria's wrist had the exact same scratch. When I pointed it out, Gloria froze for a moment, then quickly hid her hand behind her back, stubbornly saying that scratch was from me using scissors. But her explanation was too weak, and the classmates began murmuring about her. Just then, Willie walked into the classroom, carrying his backpack. Gloria, like she saw a lifeline, looked up at him, her eyes lighting up. "Willie." After hearing Gloria's version of the story, Willie rubbed her head. When he turned to look at me, he narrowed his eyes and ordered coldly, "Apologize to Gloria." I was confused and asked him, "Apologize for what?" Willie raised Gloria's wrist. "This watch, I bought it for her. A couple of days ago, she said she liked your watch, so I bought it for her, right at the store in the mall." Willie sneered, raising an eyebrow. "Olive, you know how important reputation is to someone. Yet because you looked down on a poor student, you accused her of stealing. Don't you think you should apologize?" In just a few words, he changed everything. So it was Willie who gave it to her. Looks like we were wrong about her. Who cares about the scratch? Maybe Olive just made that up. How could Olive do this? Without understanding the situation, she just blamed it on Gloria. Seeing this, Gloria smiled mockingly at me, her grin full of provocation. She pointed subtly at her drawer, and then, without a hint of hesitation, she blocked it with her body. But I saw it clearly, there was a brand new watch in the corner of her drawer. That was the one Willie had given her. "The one you gave her is in her drawer, this one is obviously mine," I said, growing desperate, shouting at Willie, "Why don't you check her drawer?" Gloria suddenly welled up with tears. "Are you going to search my drawer now?" "Why should I let you?" She stared at me stubbornly, her tears on the brink of falling. "I'm poor, my family's situation is bad, but does that mean you can trample on my dignity? I'm not trying to search your stuff. The new watch is in your drawer. All you need to do is move aside, and everyone will see it." I even tried to give her an out. "Maybe there are just two watches that look alike. You might have mistakenly taken mine." But as soon as I said that, Gloria's tears fell. "Because I'm a poor student, does that mean if someone gives me a watch, you automatically think I stole it?" She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, raising her chin defiantly. "Fine, search it." Though she said that, Gloria kept her back pressed against the drawer, refusing to move an inch. Before I could do anything, Willie suddenly grabbed my arm, his voice cold as he snapped, "Enough. If you lost something, admit it. If you're still thinking about it, I'll give you 10,000 yuan to buy a new one. Stop bullying Gloria here." I overheard some classmates murmuring, "Oh, so Olive is trying to extort Willie's money." I quickly explained, "I'm not." But Willie suddenly leaned in, getting close to me, a lazy smile curling on his lips. Olive, what are you trying to act so high and mighty for? Have you been hanging around with me so much that you really think you're from the same world as me? Gloria is a poor student, and your mom is just a waitress at a restaurant. Who are you looking down on? Willie is a rich second generation, and my family is just an ordinary working class family. In theory, we shouldn't have anything to do with each other. But when Willie ran away from home as a child, he suddenly had an asthma attack and collapsed at the door of my mom's restaurant. My mom took him to the hospital and saved his life. After that, every day after school, Willie would come to my mom's restaurant to buy a meal. He became close to me. In middle school, though we weren't in the same class, every time class ended, Willie would wait for me by the classroom door. He would lazily lean against the doorframe, his slightly tousled hair covering his eyebrows, and wave at me. Let's go home. After I came out, he would naturally take my backpack. He wouldn't take the driver's car, but would walk with me through the long alley, walking me home. When we reached my house, he would turn his back to the setting sun and wave at me in the glow. I'll pick you up for school tomorrow. I always had this illusion that Willie and I were really good friends. But now, with a smile on his face, Willie asked me, these shoes I'm wearing, your mom works a whole year and still couldn't afford them. You're not a rich person, so why look down on Gloria? But I never looked down on Gloria. The last time the school organized a donation for poor students, I gave away all my pocket money. Listening to his words, the classmates' eyes were filled with disdain. Your own family is so poor, and yet you're pretending to be rich, wearing a watch. Never buy the same things as Olive, or you might get extorted by her. What do we do now? Our school uniforms are the same. Olive probably won't say I stole her uniform, right? Laughter suddenly rang out in the crowd. Willie knew full well how much reputation matters to a person, but he was letting my name be ruined like this. Willie crossed his arms, impatiently urging me, apologize. Everyone was watching me, pressuring me with their eyes to apologize to Gloria. But I didn't do anything wrong. My dad is a construction worker who spends most of his time on the job site. I don't know how long he'll have to work in the steel and concrete before he can afford that watch. It was Gloria who took my watch. Why should I apologize to her? Unable to say the words, the situation froze. I don't know how long passed before the class monitor urged, the PE teacher is here, let's go to class. During the entire PE class, I was in a daze. After class, I returned the volleyball to the equipment room. Just as I placed the ball down, I heard a loud bang as the door slammed shut. The sound of the lock echoed, and I rushed to the door. Willie's indifferent voice came through. I know you like me, and I know you're targeting Gloria for me. When someone makes a mistake, they have to face punishment. Being locked in the small dark room is your punishment for misbehaving this time. I'm going to confess to Gloria tonight. After the confession, I'll let you out. Stay in there and behave. No matter how much I knocked on the door or cried out, he refused to unlock it. The equipment room had no windows, just this one door. There were no clocks inside, and I had lost my watch, so I couldn't tell the time. I could only watch the light outside the crack in the door grow dimmer and dimmer. It seemed like night had fallen. Today was my mom's birthday. Before school, I had told her that I'd make her a cake myself when I got home tonight. She said she'd get off work early and wait to eat the cake I made. I threw a ball at the door, kicked it with my feet, but it didn't budge. By nightfall, there was no one around. I sat at the door of the equipment room, burying my head in my knees. The autumn night was so cold and dark, and I was terrified. I was afraid that if I didn't return home tonight, my mom would go crazy with worry. When you can't see the time, it feels like time drags on forever. I dozed off in a half-conscious state, and in that haze, it felt like I saw Willie at 16. In high school, Willie and I were finally in the same class. A few of the classmates, after finding out my mom worked as a waitress, secretly laughed at me. They locked me in the back of the girls' bathroom and dumped a basin of cold water on my head. That day was like this, I kept banging on the door, but it was tightly shut. It was winter, and after being soaked in water, I was shivering uncontrollably. It was Willie who broke down the bathroom door and carried me, soaking wet, back to the classroom. He took off his down jacket and draped it over me, then turned to confront those girls. I remember him breaking a leg off a chair, his smile vicious, as he angrily asked them, "What's wrong with being a waitress? We're all human, so why act like there's a hierarchy? I huddled in his down jacket, wrapped tightly by his scent. I could look up and see his beautiful jawline, and how his eyes, usually fierce, softened when he looked at me. My breath caught for a moment, and my heart felt like it was overflowing with something. But the person who once dragged me out of the mire was the same one who, today, pushed me into it. It turns out Willie only liked being the hero, saving others. When someone weaker than me appeared, Willie naturally chose her. I don't remember how many times I woke up, only that there was no light outside the crack in the door. That night, I sat hugging my knees, chin resting on them, watching as daylight slowly filtered in. The sky brightened, but the feeling of youthful infatuation didn't survive until dawn. It was extinguished in the night. At the 16th hour, I finally heard voices. In the early morning, people were passing by the equipment room. Their conversations were a little loud and all reached my ears. Did you hear? Yesterday Willie confessed to Gloria with a drone. Gloria likes lilies, and he prepared 999 of them. Wow, I'm so envious of her. When Willie finally let me out, there was a smile in his eyes. He had his arm around Gloria's shoulders and urged me, Olive, come congratulate me. I dusted myself off, ignored him, and turned to push the door open. This action seemed to upset him. He said in a low voice, Olive, you've been really disobedient these past few days. But perhaps because his confession had been successful, he didn't get angry. Instead, he ordered me. Remember to bring us breakfast tomorrow. Oh, and she doesn't like cold food, so bring it hot. Gloria shyly added, why be so picky? It's already autumn. You're asking Olive to bring it to the classroom, isn't that putting her in a tough spot? Willie didn't answer immediately. He seemed a bit distracted, then said, she can handle it. Last winter, when it was snowing, she stuffed the breakfast into her clothes. When I got it, it was still steaming. Gloria asked him, will she bring it for me? Willie gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said softly, she will. She listens to me. I ignored them and went straight back to the classroom. My stomach hurt from hunger, and I longed for the meals my mom used to make. After packing my bag, I left the school against the flow of people. But at the school gate, I saw Gloria. This time, she was alone, Willie wasn't by her side. She took off her watch and waved at me, Olive, your dad's watch is here. Do you want it? If you do, come get it. I walked closer to Gloria. But before I could reach her, she suddenly released the watch she had been holding high in the air. The watch fell heavily to the ground, the dial shattered, and glass scattered everywhere. Gloria stepped on the white strap with her foot, tilted her head, and asked, your watch is broken, what will you do now? The tip of her shoe ground into my watch, each step feeling like it was crushing my heart. I clenched my fist and coldly asked, why did you steal my watch? Gloria chuckled, you think it's just a watch? Don't you think your relationship with Willie is like this watch? She pointed at the shards of glass on the ground and said, once it's broken, it can't be put back together. At this point, who the hell still cares about Willie? I only cared about the gift from my dad. I couldn't hold back anymore. With a punch full of force, I swung at her. Gloria's smile was instantly replaced by fear. But before my fist could land, I heard Willie's voice in my ear. Are you crazy? He lunged at me and stood in front of Gloria. Willie was 6 feet 2 inches, and in terms of size and strength, I was no match for him. He grabbed my right arm and threw me back with great force. The impact made me stumble 2 steps backward, my back slamming into the wall. The pain made me arch my back instinctively. On the other side, Gloria was crying in front of Willie, looking like a flower in the rain. She broke the gift you gave me. What the hell are you doing? Willie stood protectively in front of her and asked me slowly, are you looking down on poor students, or do you not like that I have a girlfriend? The watch is mine, and it was her who broke it. Check the school's security footage, you'll see. But Willie looked around and laughed, what are you pretending for? You chose to break the watch here, because you knew there were no cameras, right? Gloria's sobbing and Willie's scolding filled the air. I hadn't had any rest the whole night, and their noise was giving me a headache. Suddenly, I didn't want to say anything anymore. For people who don't believe me, no amount of explanation will help. Besides, I didn't need his belief anymore. In the cold autumn wind, Willie left with Gloria, leaving behind only shards of glass and a motionless watch. I bent down, picked up the watch, and wiped the dust off its strap with a tissue. Then, I turned my back on them and walked in the direction of the school gate. My mom didn't go to work today. She was standing at the school gate, her back slightly hunched, dark circles under her eyes. The moment she saw me come out, her tired eyes finally lit up. "You didn't come home last night. I searched for you all night and couldn't find you. I called your teacher, and she said you weren't at school." My mom gripped my hand tightly. "I was so worried, afraid something had happened to you. Then Willie came to find me and said you went to his house to tutor him. That made me feel better. But why would you just spend the night outside?" She shook her head, carefully asking, "Tell me, what exactly happened last night? Did someone hurt you?" I didn't answer right away. My mom's gaze moved from my tired face to the shattered watch I was holding in my hand. Her voice suddenly rose. "Did those people hurt you again? Did they lock you in the bathroom like before?" She checked me from top to bottom, and when she saw there were no injuries on me, she finally sighed in relief. But then, she slapped herself on the face and looked at me with guilt. "It's because of my job that they look down on you and bully you. I'm sorry, I failed you, made you embarrassed." How could she have failed me? She worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk, and together with my dad, who worked in another city, they supported our little family. Both my mom and dad were pillars in my heart. I wiped her tears away and took her calloused hand as we walked home together. On the way, my mom asked, "Have you thought about the transfer?" Dad worked in another city and wanted to bring us both there. But my mom worried that I might not adjust well to the sudden change of environment, so she asked me to think it over carefully. I hesitated for a long time. At first, I didn't want to leave the city where I had lived for more than 10 years, and I didn't want to leave behind the person who waved to me every morning at the doorstep, walking me to school. I wanted to tell Willie about the transfer. Last Tuesday after school, I stopped Willie. He was casually leaning against the trumpet vine wall, holding my bag in one hand, chewing on a mint candy. Before I could speak, he called me first, "Olive." "What's up?" Willie, his back to the setting sun, casually said, "I can't pick you up for school anymore. Last night, Gloria ran into some thugs in a small alley. They got handsy with her because they thought she was pretty. When I passed by, 2 of her shirt buttons were torn off, and she was struggling hard. When she heard footsteps, she looked back at me, her eyes red, tears making them look like a lost little deer. She looked so pitiful and fragile. I walked her home that night, and when I saw her place, I realized how tough life must be for a poor student." Willie tilted his head slightly and told me, "She's more obedient than you, and she needs me more. So, I can't pick you up anymore. I have a new mission." With every word, my heart dropped a little. By the time he said the last sentence, my heart hit rock bottom. All the way, he was excitedly talking about Gloria. But just 2 days ago, he couldn't stop talking about me. The once short journey now felt unbearably long, as if it would never end. When we reached my doorstep, he finally remembered me. "Oh, right, you said you wanted to tell me something before school. What was it?" I was going to tell him about the transfer. But at that moment, I just unlocked the door and didn't even look up. Was I? I forgot. In the following days, Willie was completely focused on Gloria. He didn't press me for answers, and I didn't bring it up again. Now, looking into my mom's worried eyes, I nodded. "Let's transfer. That way, our family can be reunited." For the remaining days, my mom handled the transfer paperwork at school, and I studied alone at home. But tonight, she hadn't come back yet. I tried calling her, but her phone might have been dead. I put on a coat and went out to look for her. I passed through 2 alleys and finally saw her, hunched over, walking home with a heavy heart. The street lamp stretched her shadow long. When she saw me, she slowly smiled. "I'm here." On the way back, she seemed like she wanted to say something, but she opened her mouth a few times and couldn't get the words out. I couldn't help but say, "If you want to say something, just say it." My mom hesitated for a moment before she spoke with difficulty. "Today, I saw your classmates. They walked past me, and their conversation suddenly got loud, like they were trying to make sure I heard." They said, the reason you hadn't been to school for 3 days was that you had falsely accused a poor student of stealing, and when it was exposed, you were too embarrassed to go back. Just then, my phone buzzed. There were 3 messages in a row from Willie. I know you like me, but you don't have to avoid me just because I have a girlfriend. We're all adults, so stop being childish. The things you did wrong, Gloria has forgiven you. Don't ruin yourself. Bring me breakfast tomorrow. I'm giving you one chance. Be a good girl, okay? I glanced at the messages, then put my phone down, looking at my mom. Mom, what do you think? She zipped up my jacket without a word of reproach, her eyes full of tenderness. They said those things about you, and it hurts to hear it. You must feel even worse inside. Though I don't know exactly what happened, I know what kind of person my daughter is, and no one can talk down to me about her. You must have been through a lot. I wanted to be a strong daughter in front of my mom, but for some reason, at that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears. She wiped them away. Don't cry. The transfer paperwork is all done. We'll go to a new city, to a new school, and start a new life. Through the tears, we exchanged a smile, wiped away the last of our tears, and walked up the hill together, pushing the cart. Suddenly, I remembered Willie's messages and took out my phone. I didn't reply. I just blocked him completely. I was going to start a new life. So, Willie, goodbye forever. In the new city, I went to college and never returned to that northern town. Willie was sealed away in my memories. In my 3rd year, the school held a social event. Class monitor Hetty insisted that I sign up with her. Olive, just come with me. Hetty was my best friend in college. Unable to resist her persistence, I agreed. By the time Hetty and I arrived, a lot of people had already gathered. Just as the event was about to start, I suddenly heard a sweet voice. Willie, the maple leaves are just the right color, could you take a picture of me? That voice was too familiar. I instinctively turned around and saw Gloria. The person next to her, leaning against the red maple tree with his arms crossed, his sharp features framed by a messy fringe, was Willie. The moment I saw him, I quickly turned my head, pretending I didn't recognize him. Old acquaintances should stay in the past. There was no need for them to reappear. The host of the social event arrived and began calling out names for the groups. Soon, my name was called. Olive. Here. The next moment, another voice sounded. Someone called my name, Olive? I didn't need to turn around to know it was Willie calling me. Why hasn't he left yet? Is the maple leaf that beautiful? I was swallowed up by the crowd and didn't respond to him, acting as if I didn't hear. After all, from his perspective, all he could see were a bunch of backs of heads. Who knows which one is mine? It seemed like Gloria was persuading Willie, saying, just go. It's just a coincidence. It can't possibly be her. She's been gone for 3 whole years. She left because you exposed her for falsely accusing me of stealing, and she was too embarrassed to face me again. How could she dare show up in front of you? There was a long silence on the other side. Willie didn't speak, and his footsteps were all over the place. I guessed he must have left with Gloria. The social event was simple. Everyone gathered, played games, and got to know each other. Time passed quickly, and as the event was about to end, a guy from my group came up to ask for my phone number. After the event, Hetty suddenly tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "There's a really handsome guy who's been staring at you since the event started. He's standing under that tree." I looked in the direction she pointed to. The area under the tree was empty, with no one there. Hetty rubbed her eyes. He was just standing there. How did he disappear so quickly? She wanted to run over to check, but I stopped her. Forget about him. Let's go back to the dorm. On the way back, Hetty kept talking about the guy who had been watching me. He's really handsome. During the game, I noticed he was looking at you with such intensity. Too bad you weren't with me, or I would have told you right away. His looks are definitely your type. Don't you want to think about it? Maybe if we go back, he'll be standing under the red maple tree again. She kept going on, and I interrupted her. After staring at him for so long, did you catch the brand of his denim jacket? Hetty thought for a moment. From the logo, it looks like it's from LV. That's it. Ever since I've known him, aside from the school uniform, Willie has always worn designer brands from head to toe. Hetty touched her nose awkwardly and said, "Seems like he's rich, and we're not from the same world. Let's forget about it." She stretched out lazily. In the end, making money is the most reliable. We should think about where we can pick up some part-time work. Hetty and I both came from poor families. Since our freshman year, we've worked part-time jobs and tried hard to secure scholarships, hoping to lessen the burden on our families. After I returned to the dorm, my life went back to the way it was. That brief appearance of Willie and Gloria felt like a mere illusion. Just when I thought university life would continue as usual, I suddenly saw a familiar figure at the entrance as I went downstairs. I couldn't avoid it, and our eyes met. Willie smirked, his tone casual, but his voice was cold. "Long time no see, Olive." I glanced at him calmly, but didn't greet him, turning to walk away. I had made plans for today. The guy from the last event who added me on social media was named Lester. He had introduced me to a tutoring job and planned to take me to meet the employer today. But Willie didn't seem ready to let me go. He coldly asked, "You've been avoiding me for 3 years. Are you going to keep avoiding me?" The crowd downstairs stopped and turned to look as soon as he said that. I couldn't lose face, so I pulled him to the side. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" He raised an eyebrow as if hearing a joke, then suddenly pushed me against the wall. One hand pressed down on my shoulder, and the other braced against the wall as he gritted his teeth and asked, "Olive, I've been looking for you for 3 years. 3 whole years. Do you have a heart made of flesh? How dare you just disappear without saying anything?" I tried to push him away, but his grip was too strong, and I couldn't budge. His eyes were full of coldness as he lifted my chin. "How could you bear to leave me?" I found it laughable. "What's there to feel sorry for? We're just classmates. Do you really think I need your approval to transfer? And let go of me." "Classmates?" Willie bit the word hard. "We've known each other for over 10 years, and you call us just classmates?" So, he knew we had a history of over 10 years. Then what did he do? He publicly accused me of looking down on poor students. He locked me in the equipment room for 16 hours. He arrogantly made me bring breakfast to his girlfriend. I looked at him indifferently. "Willie, no matter what's going on with you, don't look for me again. I don't want to see you. When I transferred, it wasn't to avoid you. I just wanted to reunite with my father. You overestimate yourself. And hurry up and let go of me. If Gloria sees this, you'll be in trouble, and I will be too." His grip didn't loosen. Willie tilted his head to scrutinize me, and his furrowed brow slightly relaxed. "Olive, are you jealous of Gloria? You still like me, don't you?" "I've already." Before he could finish, Lester, who had agreed to meet me downstairs, arrived. He froze when he saw the situation. "Olive? Are you still going out with me tonight?" Willie turned to look at him, narrowing his eyes slightly. "Is this the guy you met at the last event?" He suddenly released me, raised an eyebrow at Lester, and asked with a half-smile, "So, you two are already chatting? Going out on a date tonight?" Before Lester could answer, Willie unexpectedly punched him in the face. Lester, who was usually polite and refined, was no match for Willie. His glasses shattered, and a bruise appeared on his cheek. "You want to lay your hands on my woman? You should look at yourself in the mirror first. Do you really think you're good enough? Are you out of your mind?" I yanked Willie's hair and pulled him away. Lester had never seen anything like this and was stunned, rooted to the spot, unable to move. It wasn't until the patrolling security guards arrived that they broke up the scene. "Willie paid for Lester's medical bills and glasses. I thought you two were going on a date." "I didn't know you were bringing her to find a part-time job. Lester's injuries were because of me, so I apologized repeatedly." He pursed his lips and said nothing, grabbed the money, and walked away. That evening, he deleted my contact information, and the tutoring job we had planned was also gone. I turned and walked away, not wanting to look at Willie anymore. But he called out to me from behind, "I haven't finished talking. I broke up with Gloria a long time ago. We've been broken up for 3 years. I've been looking for you all this time." The autumn wind stirred the fallen phoenix tree leaves. The dim street light cast a yellow glow on Willie. When I turned back, his eyes were shining. Gloria's family is struggling, and I felt sorry for her, so I've been helping her finish her studies. Right now, what we have is just a relationship between a sponsor and a sponsored student. She's studying in this city. She just happened to come with me to visit your school that day. That's all. And about the things from back then? Willie. I interrupted him and told him seriously, who you're with now is none of my business. I really don't like you. Please stay out of my life and don't bother me again. Willie stood there, frozen, unable to speak for a moment. As I turned to head back to the dorm, light rain began to fall. People hurried along, trying to find shelter from the rain. But Willie seemed oblivious, standing silently in place. Even when a leaf from the phoenix tree landed on his shoulder, he didn't notice, standing still. I didn't look back. I went to the dorm, took a hot shower, and curled up in bed, looking at part-time job listings. In the following days, I often saw Willie. He was always alone, watching me from a distance. I ignored him, pretending not to notice. He never spoke, silently watching me walk away. And today, at the Maple Garden cafeteria, I ran into another familiar face, Gloria. She asked someone to help her recharge her campus card and placed her tray opposite mine. Let's talk, old classmate. That day at the social event, I only glanced at Gloria briefly and didn't get a good look at her. Now that she sat across from me, I realized that the person who had changed the most over the past 3 years was actually Gloria. The once poor student now looked incredibly wealthy. Wearing a Hermes necklace, carrying a Dior bag, and draped in a Chanel coat. From head to toe, she was wearing designer brands, just like Willie. She gave a quick look at my outfit, then smirked. After all these years, you still look so shabby. I didn't want to engage with her, so I lowered my head and ate. But she insisted on striking up a conversation. You don't seriously think Willie likes you, do you? Well, you're wrong. Back then, your sudden departure threw Willie off balance, so he searched for you everywhere. Once he found you, he filled that gap. How long do you think he'll still be interested in you? Gloria fiddled with her nails and smirked. Don't forget, in his eyes, you're the one who slandered and bullied a poor student. That's always been a thorn in his heart. He's a soft-hearted guy, so as long as I act pitiful in front of him and bring up old memories, sooner or later, he'll grow tired of you. As if she had thought of something, Gloria chuckled lowly. Oh right, you probably don't know. I've been by Willie's side these past 3 years. When he came here for college, I came with him. All these necklaces and bags, he bought them for me. She really was so annoying. Who cares about competing for trash with you? I ate my meal in silence, wasting money on this meal. Gloria raised an eyebrow. Are you pretending? A girl from a poor family like you must be jealous deep down, seeing how I can live like this. Before she could finish, Hetty, holding her tray, walked up to us, grabbed her bowl of soup, and splashed the seaweed egg drop soup directly onto Gloria's face. Gloria screamed in surprise, glaring at Hetty angrily. Hetty quickly pulled her hand back. Oh no, I didn't hold it steady, sorry about that. But, classmate, we earn our living with our own hands, so what's so poor about us? She tossed Gloria a napkin, grabbed me as we finished eating, and left. After that day, Gloria and Willie disappeared from my sight. My world returned to peace. The student I was tutoring called in sick that weekend, and I hadn't been home for weeks, so I called my mom and told her I'd be coming home this week. My mom was really happy on the other end of the phone, saying she'd make my favorite dishes. When I got home that evening, the table was already filled with food. You're back, my parents said as they came out of the kitchen, urging me to sit down. My mom smiled at me. You won't believe it, guess who showed up? At the table, there was already someone sitting. It was Willie. When I saw him in my house, every drop of blood in my body seemed to freeze. My parents had already sat down, urging me. Why are you still standing there? I had a lot to say, but seeing the joyful expressions on my parents' faces, the words stuck in my throat. I numbly pulled out a chair and sat next to my mom. While my mom served Willie some food, she happily said, "Funny, just ran into Willie the other day." I asked, and turns out, he's studying here too. Willie smiled and said, I didn't expect Olive to be in Wuhan. Guess it's fate. I don't know why, but suddenly they started talking about the past. Willie took a sip of soda and asked, "Do you remember that time you were shoved on the stairs and twisted your ankle? I carried you to the hospital, and you were lying on my back, whining how much it hurt." It was snowing heavily that day. I was holding on to Willie's neck, pressed against his ear, which had turned bright red from the cold. Looking back, all I could see in the snow were footprints, stretching far from the distance. At that time, I naively thought that our lives could overlap, just like those footprints in the snow. He seemed lost in the distant memory, and said a lot. He mentioned getting into a fight, where the other party was many against one, and his ear was scratched. I found him on the playground and dragged him home, carefully cleaning his wound at dusk. He also talked about how, ever since I fainted from low blood sugar, he kept a stash of candy in his pocket, and eventually, even he got into the habit of eating candy. By the time he finished, my mom sighed a little. Back in the old town, her best friend was you. Before she transferred, she had so much going on at home, she didn't even have time to invite you out for a meal. She put some eggplant on my plate and smiled. Do you remember the night before you transferred? You were bullied and didn't come home all night. I was about to lose my mind. Willie is such a kind boy, he told me you were helping him with a lesson, so I wouldn't worry. Hearing this, Willie froze for a moment, then awkwardly tugged at the corner of his mouth, but didn't respond. I suddenly felt nauseous. Locking me in the equipment room and then pretending to be the good guy in front of my mom? How dare he act in front of me like that? A villain shouldn't be treated as a hero. Mom, I put down my chopsticks and looked at her. That night, when I didn't come home, I was locked in the school's equipment room. My mom, who had been trying to protect me from the truth back then, immediately asked, "Who locked you?" Willie. Both of my parents were stunned. They put down their chopsticks and looked at Willie with heavy gazes. Willie hadn't expected me to suddenly bring this up. He swallowed the lotus root slice in his mouth and hurriedly explained, "This is how it went. Remember, your uncle bought Olive a watch. Well, I gave the same watch to a poor student in my class. Olive lost hers and then blamed the poor student, humiliating her in front of everyone. I was young and impulsive. I thought Olive had done something wrong and should be punished, so I locked her in the equipment room. I didn't mean anything by it, I just wanted her to learn a lesson." By the end of his explanation, he looked at me directly and for the first time apologized. "Olive, no matter what, locking you up for a whole night was my fault. I'm sorry." I ignored him and just looked at my parents. I wanted to see their reaction. My mom's gentle smile disappeared. "So, Olive looks down on poor students? She lost something and then blamed it on the poor student?" Willie remained silent. His silence spoke louder than words. "Willie, you've known Olive for 11 years. 11 years, not 11 days. Don't you know what kind of person she is?" My mom suddenly stood up, pointed toward the door, and shouted, "Get out of my house." My dad said nothing, but with disgust, he grabbed Willie's jacket and dragged him toward the door, slamming it shut behind them. "I thought you were a good kid, but it turns out you've been bullying her." My mom couldn't hold back her anger, hands on her hips, shouting at him, "What a piece of trash." She cursed for a long time through the door, then turned around and put her arm around my shoulder. "You've been wronged. I'm never talking to that trash again." My dad didn't ask what happened back then, he just came over and stood by me. He's not usually someone who expresses himself, but now he awkwardly said, "We believe in you. You would never do something like that. You don't need to explain, your dad believes in you. See, that's my forever support and confidence." That meal, after Willie left, we ate even more happily. When I headed back to school this week, my parents took me to the subway station. I had just boarded the train when someone cautiously asked, "Olive, is that you?" I turned to look and saw a girl looking at me shyly. Her face seemed familiar. After a moment of thinking, I realized it was Ivy, my classmate from high school. She sat in the back row, didn't talk much, and we didn't have much interaction. When she saw me, she was so happy and started chatting with me for several stops. We exchanged phone numbers. I got off at the next station, but she got off one stop earlier than me. Before she left, she suddenly said, "Olive, I'm sorry." I didn't know what she was apologizing for, and I wanted to ask, but the subway doors closed, and she quickly disappeared from my sight. The chat was empty, and she never brought up the apology again. I thought I might have imagined it. That night, right after I got back to the dorm, she added me to a group. The group had Willie and Gloria in it. It was the class group from high school. With me added, there were 53 classmates in total. Then, she tagged me in the group and sent a long, long message. I never expected that the truth, which had been hidden for years, would be suddenly exposed 3 years later, out of the blue. During the senior year physical checkup, we had to get a chest x-ray and were forbidden from bringing in anything metallic. I took off my watch and put it in my backpack. Gloria was the first to finish all the checkup items and return to the classroom. She went through my backpack, found my watch, and put it on her wrist. Then, she left the classroom and returned with the others. But that day, Ivy didn't go for the checkup because she wasn't feeling well. When Gloria first came back to the classroom, Ivy happened to walk out of the bathroom. She saw Gloria stealing my watch and putting it on. I heard you guys mocking Olive, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. But I was too weak back then, and following the principle of not getting involved in unnecessary trouble, I just kept my head down and didn't say anything. My conscience has been uneasy. After Olive transferred schools, I felt even guiltier. I kept thinking I owed her an apology. If I ever saw her again, I would definitely apologize in person and tell her the truth. Olive, I'm so sorry. I knew you were innocent, but when the other classmates were mocking you, I chose to stay silent and let them tear you apart. Over the years, I've dreamed about that day countless times, seeing the uncomfortable look on your face. I really am sorry. I stared at these words, unable to speak for a long time. After a while, my old desk mate suddenly spoke up in the group. Actually, that day, I saw another watch in Gloria's drawer. The one Olive was wearing really was hers, not the one Gloria had. But I knew Willie liked Gloria, and I knew he came from a wealthy family. I didn't want to offend Willie, so I stayed quiet. Olive, I'm so sorry. The truth stirred up a storm. Classmates who hadn't spoken in years suddenly flooded the group with messages. I blindly believed Willie back then and wrongly blamed you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said such hurtful things. I'm sorry. I just picked a side without knowing the truth. I'm sorry. I stared at these messages for a long time, then sighed deeply. It's okay, it's all in the past now. In fact, the ones who should be apologizing aren't them, but the instigators. The ones who stole from me and hypocritically smeared my name. The ones who had known me for 11 years but still pushed me into the abyss. And yet, Willie and Gloria remained silent. Before long, I received a friend request. Olive, it's Willie. I have something I want to say to you. I didn't accept his request. It was strange. The truth had come out, but suddenly I felt like crying. Hetty happened to return to the dorm, and I turned to ask her, why is it that when there's conflict, bystanders always instinctively side with the wealthy? She handed me a bottle of alcohol. Want some? Sure. We clinked glasses on the balcony where we were hanging clothes. The moon was full tonight. Under the moon, after a bit of drinking, our feelings couldn't stay hidden. Who didn't go through some messed up stuff in high school? Hetty leaned back in her chair, squinting her eyes slightly. Back then, I liked someone named Mark. One time, after a physical checkup, Mark's ex insisted that there was a bug in my backpack and made me dump everything out in front of everyone. My sanitary pads fell out. Loose ones. I knew they weren't ideal, but I was at my poorest, and I couldn't afford branded ones. Mark's ex laughed and asked how I could be so poor. Someone asked if Mark liked me. His ex immediately said, how could Mark like a poor girl like her? I crouched down to pack my bag quietly, but I secretly hoped Mark would say something to defend me. Hetty smiled bitterly, her eyes full of loneliness. He was always special to me. We even promised to go to the same city for college. I thought he liked me too. But that day, he didn't say a word of defense. He just turned around and left, like being seen with me was something shameful. So when it came time to apply for college, I didn't follow our promise. I stayed far away from him. All these years, I never understood why Mark ran away that day. I wasn't bad looking, my grades were great, and I was a good person. Maybe the only flaw was being poor. That probably embarrassed him, being from a wealthy family. But Olive, our family situation isn't something we can choose. What we can do is make ourselves better. Look, we study hard for scholarships, we don't let our families worry, and we live our own lives. There's nothing shameful about that. Really? She had never told me this before, and I had never mentioned Willie either. We both had bad tolerance for alcohol. After drinking a bit, we were already tipsy and clinked glasses again. I patted her on the shoulder. Today is a good day. I've finally cleared my name. Hetty took a big gulp and spat. Today is definitely not a good day. Damn it, I ran into Mark at school. He's here as an exchange student for a year. He was red-eyed, looking for me, saying how I promised to go to the same city with him and how could I break my word. Hetty mumbled, her eyes starting to water. I was drunk by then, and I forgot everything she said afterward. It all slipped away from my memory. The next morning, when I woke up, I saw Gloria's photo on social media. It was just a side profile, but I could immediately recognize her. The caption read, "Is it reasonable for someone receiving government assistance to wear designer clothes?" The post mentioned that Gloria applied for aid every year, but she lived better than most people, even refusing to stay in the school dorms and renting an entire apartment off campus. I found it somewhat ridiculous. She truly never missed a chance to grab whatever money was available. I didn't comment, just silently closed the page. 4 days later, after leaving the library and passing by the May Garden CBD, I ran into Willie again. His face looked awful, with dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. Can we talk? I went back to my hometown and learned some things. In the cafe, Willie looked at me with a sense of guilt. I saw the messages in the group that day. I asked Gloria about it, but she denied everything. The next morning, I immediately bought a ticket to go back home and found those thugs. They were still hanging around on the streets. After I gave them money, they told me that Gloria had known them for a long time. Gloria knew I had a habit of running at night, so she staged that whole scene on my regular route, making me play the hero and save her. I misjudged her. Gloria may have been poor, but she was never some fragile, delicate flower, she's a snake. Everything was part of her plan, all directed by her. I immediately stopped all my financial support to her. He said all of this in one breath, biting his lip as he looked at me. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you for all these years. I really wasn't able to see her true nature. Olive, if I could do it all over again, I would never have done that. He took a deep breath, struggling to say, I've always had you in my heart. From way back, even then, Gloria was just a temporary distraction, sparking my protective instincts, but that wasn't love. I'm just so slow to realize things. It wasn't until you left that I finally understood my true feelings. When I was 18, I saw your draft paper. It wasn't just formulas, it was filled with my name, and scratched out words saying I love you. So, you really did like me back then, didn't you? Then, in light of the 11 years we've known each other, could you give me a chance to start over? He reached out his hand to me. I felt like I was seeing the 18-year-old Olive again. The summer of 18, when the grass grew wildly, and the August wind blew through the streets, with dusk climbing the walls. Back then, the feeling of falling for someone was like endless wild grass. When Willie reached out his hand, I would have run to him, lifting the hem of my skirt. But the 21-year-old Olive, staring at his hand so close, only felt repulsed. That night in the equipment room, before dawn, I already stopped liking you. I accept your apology. But from now on, let's just pretend we don't know each other. I stood up indifferently and walked away. Willie remained seated in the cafe. People came and went around him, the coffee on the table went cold, but he didn't move. Eventually, the embossed pattern on the surface began to ripple. The coffee had turned bitter and salty. Willie and Gloria both disappeared from my life. I learned of Gloria's latest news from Ivy. She told me that Gloria's assistance had been cut off, and Willie had also stopped all his financial support to her. Having gotten used to a good life for all these years, transitioning from luxury to austerity was too much for her to handle. She couldn't stand the thought of downgrading her lifestyle. She thought about taking a part-time job, but she found it tiring and inconvenient, feeling like it would take away from her fun time. So, she ended up borrowing money from a loan shark. Later, I saw the names Gloria and Willie in the news. Gloria couldn't repay her online loans and went to ask Willie for money. They had a huge argument and parted ways in anger. That night, Willie got in his car, intending to leave. But Gloria blocked his car and told him if he didn't give her money, she would stand in front of it and not move a step. After a long standoff, it seemed they started talking about their high school days. According to the parking lot surveillance footage, the two of them had a big fight. As dawn approached, in a fit of rage, Willie slammed the accelerator. The car hit Gloria. She lost too much blood and fainted on the spot. After being rushed to the hospital, she was declared brain dead and became a vegetable. As for Willie, he was arrested on charges of a crime and faced prison time. After reading this report, I felt a bit melancholic. At 18, my youthful love died in the dim morning light. At 21, the story stretched no further than the first light of dawn. And me, I'm different from them. The sun will rise at the end of the darkness, lifting me up. I will continue to live brightly in this precious world. End.